Attention, please. Could everybody please take their seat? We'd like to get started. First of all, the governor's going to be a few minutes late, so we're going to start ahead of time to keep on track. I want to welcome everyone this afternoon. On behalf of the League of Women Voters of Fremont County and Wyoming, I'd like to welcome you to our town hall with Governor Mark Gordon. My name is Linda Barton, and I have the honor of serving as chairperson of the League of Women Voters of Fremont County and as the state president of the League of Women Voters of Wyoming. The League is a grassroots organization built on the principle that people play a critical role in democracy. We are dedicated to voter services and education. Defending voting rights is at the core of the League's mission. That includes safeguarding the accessibility of the election process for all Wyoming citizens. The League is proud to be nonpartisan, never supporting or opposing candidates of any political parties at any level of government. Because informed voters are empowered voters, we take great care to address policy issues that are important to our members and to our communities. We are pleased to partner with County 10 today, which is hosting the live stream of this event and will host a post-event video recording. Here's how the town hall is going to go today. Both Steph Kessler and I will be serving as your moderators. We have chosen 4 topics to discuss today: Wyoming's election system and process, civility within our democratic process, accountability of our government to our constituents, and Wyoming's future. After a brief introduction of each topic, we will hear from the governor. Each topic will give the governor the opportunity to discuss a wide range of issues focused on elections. Both Steph and I will ask follow-up questions, and when time allows, League member Era Aranow will pass a microphone to audience members. Due to time constraints, we kindly ask the audience to limit their remarks to 1 question and to focus only on election issues. We cannot accept questions from the online audience, and I apologize about that. We want to thank you in advance to hold your applause until the end of the event and refrain from any interruptions that could distract from the conversation. We thank you in advance for your interest and participation today. And because we are short of time, we will go through the first 2 topics, then open it up to questions, then go to the second 2 topics, and do it again and open it up to questions. And here's our governor right now. This is a hot seat, yes. No, not too hot, just warm. Today we are privileged to host Governor Mark Gordon and learn more about his role in safeguarding our democracy, Wyoming's election system, and voting rights. In 2018, Governor Gordon was elected the 33rd governor of Wyoming. Prior to assuming that office, Gordon served as Wyoming State Treasurer from 2012 until 2018. Currently, he and his wife, Jenny, own a cow-calf operation that breeds Angus Hereford cross cattle. Gordon has run several businesses, including 2 focused on outdoor recreation and tourism, and has worked in the oil and gas industry. And I want to personally thank you for coming to share your time with the League of Women Voters today. Thank you. And we will start. Does he get a mic? Oh, no. I'm sorry. You just have to shout really loud.
Okay. I need something to drop.
Okay, this is on, right?
Yes.
Okay. Governor, thank you for being here with us today. And the first topic is about Wyoming's election system. And I'm going to start right off. There have been 5 cases of documented voter fraud in Wyoming in the last 25 years, according to the Heritage Foundation. One of those was a sitting legislator who lied about her address. 2 were a couple who claimed they still lived in Evansville, and the other was a felon who had moved here from Alaska and voted in 2 elections. So we count that as 2 cases. During that time, approximately 4.5 million ballots were cast in Wyoming, making for a voter fraud rate of 11/100,000th% of fraud in a quarter of a century, or a rate of 28/10,000th% annually. Governor, does Wyoming have a voter election fraud problem?
Steph, thanks so much. It's really nice to be here. You know, I have consistently said that the people that Wyoming folks elect to be their clerks, which is where the power to run elections is really centered, do a very credible job. And I consistently have maintained that we can always improve what we're doing, but in terms of a lot of fraud, I don't see it. I think those statistics, there may be a few more that get through, but the fact of the matter is that I think our clerks take the job very seriously. Our Constitution put the power to manage the elections where our Constitution puts a lot of the power for government, and in fact where our national Constitution also puts that power, which is at the local level. So I'm a Republican. I love the fact that small government closest to the people is what we believe in, and I think that is really the case that should be made. So to answer your question directly, I'm sure that, I mean, we have a system that works. When we find the anomalies that are there, there is a period of time when people can check the records, walk through them. If there's necessary to do a hand count, they can do the hand count, and finally the canvassing board advances those cases on up. So there you are.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Governor, in 2025 the election session, 45 bills were introduced to micromanage our elections and the county clerks who implement them. While most of these bills failed, another 11 such bills were brought back in this summer's Interim Corporations and Elections Committee. Can you help us understand why the legislature is treating our county governments as if they are untrustworthy and incapable, requiring state oversight and intervention? In fact, the very people who have boots on the ground for decades delivering safe elections in Wyoming, our county election offices, oppose these efforts. And does this constitute governmental overreach and an unfunded mandate on the counties?
In some cases, I believe there is the unfunded mandate possibility. I think the legislature has the desire to make sure that elections are handled well, and as I have said, I think there's always the opportunity to improve the process. Now, is there overkill? Perhaps. It is, I mean, if you look at the legislature today, they all got there by a supposedly flawed system. Yet, you know, now we're really quite anxious to make sure that we correct that. I do think that clerks, by and large, take their job very seriously. I think that having served now for several years as governor, I am always impressed by the fact that people in Wyoming expect their clerks, expect those elections to be handled properly. There's a lot of variety between larger cities and the small ones. I can remember in KC when I would go, it was always an event that we looked forward to. You would go and you'd see your neighbors, you could talk about a lot of different things. I do remember, this is probably a little bit off topic, but just because I love stories, there was a wonderful woman, Sandy Dixon, who was going through chemo, and she was also an election judge. And this was one of the elections that was for president, and she had a bunch of air sickness bags, and she was handing them out to each voter and saying, "I'm glad you were here, but you probably need this more than I do." So, and I will tell you, Sandy was serious about making sure that the elections were handled well. I'm sure Lander is the same. I'm sure Riverton is the same. I bet Du Bois, any community you go to, when you go to the precinct, polling place, people that you have known for a long time are there. Now, there are a lot of people moving in. Our Constitution requires that you be a verified citizen. That is right there in the Constitution. We've actually done a couple of laws over the top of that, but it's fundamental, always has been. The proof of residency, you couldn't vote here initially if you weren't a resident of the state for a year. There's federal law that kind of interfered with that recently, and we'll see how that sorts itself out. But these are longstanding traditions in election history. I do think that, and I'm going to opine just a little bit. You know, the legislature is everywhere active, and they are seeking ways to pull power to themselves. That's not me speaking. That's James Madison in Federalist 48. This is a tradition that this country has always wrestled with. And the fact that we have a separation of powers is absolutely critical. And so when you see one branch of government, one department as they call it in the Federalist Papers, that is trying to take all those powers to itself, the judicial, the executive, and the legislative, that's the definition of tyranny. Also, James Madison, Federalist 41. You can find in Hamilton, same references. This is something that our Constitution is very aware of. And as voters, I think it's important that we weigh carefully what we see happening in terms of ebbs and flows in that divisions of power. That wasn't really your question, but it's on my mind.
Well, Governor, I think that was related to the question because we asked, like, help us understand this and what's going on here. Thank you.
Steph, one more thing. What I really worry about, growing up here, Dad was in politics, Mom was in politics, not in an elected office, but precinct people. Dad went to the 1964 convention. There were just, you know, a lot of, we worked very hard to get Malcolm Wallop elected. We've had a long, my sister worked for Cliff Hansen. We've had a very long role in politics in Wyoming. In all that time, I don't believe I've ever seen the distrust between people that we have. And in fact, in all that time, I've never seen the legislature, and this is I worry about, whether it's overt or not, I am concerned that the legislature is trying to take to itself the powers that aren't accorded to it in the Constitution of how to run elections. And I do worry that as citizens of Wyoming, that's a choice we want to see if that's really a good one, or if we really want to make sure that we stay with local government closest to the people.
Thank you. Thanks for that additional, those additional insights. Our last question in this topic of just the election system relates to voter turnout. In the 2024 primary, only 27% of the Wyoming voter age population voted. Is this a concern? And if so, what are your suggestions for increasing voter turnout?
Yeah, I think it is a concern. reportedly, former Governor Dave Friedenthal said, "Why is it that more people buy hunting licenses than vote?" And his response was, because they're happier with what they get at the end of it. And that is probably true. I think it's an incredible concern. My wife was in getting her teeth cleaned right before the last election, and her dentist said, "Boy, I'm so excited to be involved in this election. I'm all ready to vote for people." And Jenny said, "Did you vote in the primary?" And he said, "When was that?" And I think I think you all are very interested in elections. I think it's incumbent on you. Civics education in America has really declined, and it's exciting that no matter what form of government you prefer, or where you fall on that political spectrum, everybody is talking about the value of civics, to understand what Alexis de Tocqueville talked about is not a more enlightened government, but one that can correct itself better than anyone else in the world. So I think it's incumbent on all of us to make sure that people do show up for voting in the primary. What concerns me is that, and I'm not sure how you fix this necessarily, because there's sort of problems either side of it, but that is state fair. That's the beginning of football season, with people training. That's when people are taking their summer vacation. All of these things that I think are parts of our being as people in Wyoming. That's the beautiful time of year. It's not quite as pretty as September, but it's pretty nice. But at the same time, this is our government. And if we don't participate, Plato was the one who said, the penalty for not participating in politics is that you're destined to be ruled by someone lesser than yourself, which I think is really true. I also think of P.J. O'Rourke, who said Democrats are the people who think government makes your grass greener, gets rid of crabgrass in your lawn, makes you taller, faster, prettier, more handsome. Republicans are the party that thinks government doesn't work and then proves it.
Governor, since we have a little bit of time in this category, I'd like to just follow up on that. You've told us why this is a concern and acknowledge that, but what can we do to increase voter turnout?
Well, I think the fact that you're here today demonstrates that you care about government. Let me put it this way, no, not government. You don't care about government as much as you do about the future of our state, our county, and our country, and your neighbors' benefits. I think it's important that we each take the time to talk to our neighbors, to talk about the responsibility, yea, the privilege that has been given to us as voters, and that encourage people to exercise that. And it's a difficult time for anybody. It's a difficult time for anybody to step up and run for office. It's a difficult time for voters to really have to weigh through all of the various counterclaims and the things that aren't true, things that are true. But if you have in your gut where I want this country to go, understand that it's probably better to make sure that you vote for the local elected races, because those are the ones that are going to have the most bearing on how your life goes. I love the fact that we can vote for a president, and it is important. I have met Donald Trump, I've met Joe Biden, I've met Obama, I've met Clinton, I've met Bush, worked for Bush, not in an official capacity, but to get him elected, both of them actually. I don't think any of them have really thought about what is it I need to do for KC, Wyoming. And I will say that they set a course, and that course is very, very, very important. And I think when we have the opportunity to take what that course is and be able to, on the local level, find the right setting for how we advance our local interests, that's going to be done best here in the community that is meant to be the one you care about. So.
Thank you, Governor. We are going to move on now. We're going to switch topics to the topic of civility within our democratic process. One of those fun discussions. As you know, what we call the Wyoming Way is based on the connection to our neighbors and the idea that you're only as reliable as your word. Additionally, at the League, we support the fundamental values of honesty, respect for all people, and transparency and accountability in government. Yet we have entered a period where decorum and civility in politics have significantly deteriorated. We certainly saw this in the last primary election with many ugly, mean-spirited attack ads and flyers. At the Fremont County League-sponsored town hall in Lander and Riverton last May, Secretary Gray repeatedly cited you as the villain blocking election policy changes. Frankly, he treated you and your work with an alarming level of disrespect and what we consider dishonesty. You and the Secretary of State have had ongoing disagreements that many news outlets have publicly reported. We would like to offer you the opportunity to respond and reflect on the lack of civility within our government and our political process, and how does this harm Wyoming?
Well, I think it harms Wyoming when we can't. We're always going to disagree, and we can disagree pretty vehemently on things. But you know, being raised here and feeling as strongly as I do that it's important to honor your word, that it's important to, you know, we talk about the 10 Commandments. That 9th one's a bugger if you don't follow it. You know, this false witness piece is something that I feel very strongly we need to make sure that we do all 10 commandments, not just the first one. I think we have lost a sense of decorum. To your point, I think that's harmful because now meetings where really important topics are being discussed, they kind of devolve into spectacle as opposed to a principled conversation about what the right thing to do is and listening to one another. And I think that is to our own demise. I am always very proud of the fact that when I was first appointed governor, we bought a house on a handshake deal. There's no contract or anything else. Clint Jessen and I just came to an agreement. Everything he said he was going to do, he did. Everything I said I was going to do, I did. That's the state I grew up in. And I think it's unfortunate now that that is less reliable. And I think the fact that we, and I'm not going to speak ill of Chuck Gray, I will say I think it is a way for him to try to raise his stature. I'm not being facetious about that. I'm really saying. I think it's his way to be able to sort of call attention to himself, and the substance is really unfortunate because I think Chuck cares. The Secretary of State cares a lot about the state. He wouldn't run if it weren't for the fact that he thought he could make a difference in that, and he should be accorded some respect. I hope that I have demonstrated that on my side. I can't be responsible for someone else, but I will always listen, and I will always engage in a conversation.
Thank you. We appreciate that. We wanted to give you that opportunity.
Thank you.
We also would like to discuss running for public office. Do you think this sometimes nasty, uncivil political atmosphere and personal attacks in Wyoming will chill the interest and readiness of our citizens to consider running for office? Does this do damage to Wyoming?
Yeah, I think anytime citizens feel that they can't or won't want to participate in what I take to be the greatest experiment in self-government that the world has ever known, I think that's unfortunate. I think we're all diminished by that. But on the other hand, the scale of personal attack, the invective, the outright lies, the misinformation that now seem to propagate so much of the public discourse, it's hard for me to try to convince somebody that, put yourself through that, because there's a terrific reward on the other hand, on the other side. But on the other hand, if we don't get engaged, we surrender the field, and that is not a good option in my mind. I think you can see that over and over again in history. I would say that I think if voters spend a lot more time thinking about what's said, not just being drawn by the latest conflict. And this is all of our responsibility. I can remember one of my first debates where the moderator said I was running against Cynthia Lomas at the time, and he said, "I don't want to hear anything about what the other person is. I just want to hear what you're going to do for the people of Wyoming." I think both of us responded to that. We were on page 9 of the B section, and the next time around, somebody said something inflammatory right there on the front page. And we're human, so we respond to that. But the better angels of our nature, I would hope, would say, what is the deeper story here? And I think when you have excellent candidates who come down to the legislature, watch it for a day, and say, not doing that, that is not good. And I bet some of you probably feel that way yourself.
At this point, we will open it to the audience for some questions, and Era will, if you have questions, remember, let's stay on topic.
Can I stand up too?
You can.
All right, thank you.
Please introduce yourself.
I'm John Gans, and my question follows the one on voter turnout at 27% in the primary. But I think 2026, year coming up, the 18-year-olds in the country hit their peak. From then, it's going down. And if you look at how Wyoming holds young people, that's also not a good trend. So my concern is, how do we engage the 18-year-olds that are just coming into it when they see the headlines on everything required to vote, and they don't have a residence, and they don't have an address, and they don't have a power bill, and we turn them off in every possible way? How can we change that?
John, I think that, and I appreciate your comment, and the forms of identification are certainly an issue that the legislature's wrestled with and dealt with. They can change and find other ways to clearly identify that this is a Wyoming citizen if they chose to walk through that. But I think you've got to get a preponderance of people who are saying, okay, maybe in this case we need to be able to do a better job of allowing people who have lived here for a year or two. Maybe they're a guide, maybe they're a coal miner. We've had a number of people who've moved up to work in the Trona mines from Colorado. And so it's not all people that we can identify as they have ill will for Wyoming. They just want to live here. They just want to have a job. They want to enjoy what we have. And I think those kinds of conversations have to come up at the primary level, because at the national discussion, and everything is now about national. How many of you remember how fun it was to look at the TV and you'd see like an ad from Colorado and you go, boy, I am so glad I don't live in Colorado. And that's not the case now. It's the same deal. And I think, John, it's just getting people involved. It's getting people willing to go, and they've got to go to the primary. That's where so many of these races are decided. And I will say, Ed Buchanan, former Secretary of State, and I spent a lot of time talking about that crossover voting thing that was such a hot topic for a long time. Both of us felt that that was not a good thing in Wyoming law. I know for people it was like, I can always vote for the right person. But as a result, we lost the dynamism of having a two-party system. And so I very much support that we got rid of that crossover voting provision. And I think it's time that we get more of a conversation heading about where the course of the country is. Yes, ma'am.
We've got a question back here, and then I'll come up.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
Ken Richardson, Governor. Thank
Yep.
you for being here. I have one comment and one question. Thank you for being a voice of reason and stability, and we have so much hate in our political system, and thank you for not going there. My question is, it's been suggested that we have counting by hand of votes. Both Betsy and I have been election judges. We've worked our 14 hours at the election. I guess it's a comment. There's no way we could go for another 14 hours to hand count votes. I would like your comment on that.
Thank you. First off, thank you for being an election judge. It's getting harder and harder to be an election judge, and I think that shows your dedication to this country. So God bless you and thank you. Please, a round of applause. There may be some counties where it won't cost a lot and it can be handled relatively easily. But I think there are places where it's going to be incredibly difficult. The way the system works now, if there is an audit tape that comes back with a challenge in it, and there have been, Weston County is a great example of that, and it was because the ballots weren't correct and so on and so forth. Having the ability to do a hand count is, I think, something that we absolutely need to do. But I think we saw in Bush v. Gore that there can be real problems in a hand count as well. And so I think we have a pretty good system now where if people question the results and if it's close margin, then there is a hand count so you can verify that. I think that's important. But it's also important to be able to make sure we have enough election judges. And I'm actually kind of worried about that too. So thank you.
Hi, my name is Sarah Riley. I'm born and raised here in Lander. Thank you for being here, Governor. This sort of kind of a convoluted question, I guess. You mentioned the two-party system and how important it is to have that dynamic between the two parties. But Thomas Jefferson actually warned us against a two-party system, that would be the demise of democracy. And I wonder how that sort of plays into what we're seeing in politics today, where in Wyoming, anyway, people tend to vote very firmly along party lines. I was born and raised Republican. I will always vote Republican. They don't look at the platform anymore. Same with Democrats. So, but if you actually look at the ideology of different groups, we really have probably 4 or 5 different ideologies in Wyoming alone. So I wonder what you think about whether diversification of that would actually be more beneficial, or if it really is a reliable choice for voters to stick to those party lines on that two-party system.
Yeah, well, I think it's important to note that parties evolve over time, pretty remarkably. And to be able to have the 2 points of view, I think allows for a fairly robust conversation. I don't disagree that it's great to have other parties as well and other opportunities. But if you've seen, Israel or Germany or any of these other where we have to assemble the parliament based on what's going to happen. There's a lot of horse trading that gets done. I'm not clear that's a better system than we have. You know, I would maintain mathematically that the Electoral College virtually assures that we have a two-party system. And I think the Electoral College is, I know a lot of people don't like it, but I think it's brilliant in the sense that it allows states like Wyoming to play a more significant role in national politics than otherwise. And I think that was always the genius of that moment. But I think because of that and because of the mathematics involved, it does pretty much mean that we'll have a two-party system. Now, I think that also means that engaging in party politics, because that's a lot of what has happened, I think, I'm going to go out and probably put myself in danger. But, you know, it was always a reasonable assumption that precinct committee people were representative of the communities that voted for them. Perhaps of late that's become a little narrower pool to fish from, and I think there's some concerns there that we should be aware of, which means being engaged with your party, which means, and I agree with you, that, you know, sometimes you don't agree with a party platform, but that's because we're Americans. We have the ability to not agree with everything. So, thanks.
We'll have another opportunity for questions after the next two sections.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Governor. We're now switching topics to talk about accountability of our elected officials to their constituents. During the 2024 legislative session, when discussing House Bill 70, Local Government Distributions, Representative John Baer, then chairman of the Wyoming Freedom Caucus, questioned if our small towns need to receive funding from the state and asked, should they exist? Additionally, Representative Baer recently stated that tax cuts for wealthy second homeowners in places like Teton County are good because the tax breaks would help rich people buy more private jets and jet fuel, thus helping our oil and gas industry. Governor, is there something wrong here? Small towns are the heart of Wyoming and one of our greatest strengths. And while we appreciate that Jackson attracts a lot of wealthy individuals who can afford to buy more private jets, do these statements represent an understanding of everyday, hardworking Wyomingites?
Boy, Steph, I'd never accuse you of a leading question. Let me say that coming from a small town, I can't imagine losing them. But you know, the Sussex, it was a community at one time. Van Tassel, a community of probably 2,000 people at one time. You know, communities do come and go. But I think Wyoming's spirit is such that we want to, we have a real loyalty to our communities, and we lose something if we let them just die on the vine. And that I think a very unfortunate comment on the part of Representative Baer. I don't know really what the context of it was or anything else. But I will say that if you go to the basin, you know, you got Otto, you got Burlington, you've got Lovell, you've got Grable, you've got just a tremendous number of communities, each a little bit different, each rich, and they're all somehow related to each other. Shell, Powell, you know, and Cowley. I mean, you just kind of go through this, and you realize that's part of the fabric that makes Wyoming what it is, and why it's such a great place. You know, between Riverton and Lander, what would you think Port Hudson would do if it didn't have some I guess to figure things out. But I think it's really important that there are certain functions that Wyoming has always thought, as a government, we can help with communities so that the tax burden isn't increased, so that the residents still have a home that they can live in. And those are things that I think we should cherish as Wyoming people. And that does take government helping at times. I can think of Thermopylae. I mean, I can go on and on, Opal, places that we have helped because that's what we do. And the people that live there, I think are important, you know, that don't just pack up and go somewhere else. As to the conversation about more jet fuel, you know, that group of Club No folks have made the wrong impression, have spoken incorrectly about me trying to shut down the refinery in Weston County because you know, I was trying to be overly green or something like that. The fact of the matter is that's the only refinery that produces aviation fuel in Wyoming for local markets. And it hasn't changed really that much of their sales pitch to have a few more jets that show up. I think far more important is what are the responsibilities of living in this state? What are the things you should do? And I put this in this framework, which is why I was trying to get around to it a little bit awkwardly. I apologize. But Florida, when I first visited there in probably the mid-1980s, was wrestling with much of the same problem Wyoming is. Everybody was moving to retire to Florida because it didn't have a fierce tax code. It didn't have income tax. And as a result, the people that were moving to Florida didn't really care about schools. They didn't really care that much about the community. As a friend of mine said, they aren't coming here to be buried. They're coming here to live, and they're going to go home when they die. So they didn't want to put anything into it. And that's, I think, the issue that we're really wrestling today with when we talk about how do we have more young people here. That's why I've been so focused on making sure that we try to make our education system second to none, that this is the best place to raise your family, that your kids can go out and play with their neighbors and not feel you know, that they're going to be in danger, that when you go across the state to play soccer, you're gonna know half the kids there, and if you end up in the championship, some of those kids are actually going to cheer for your team that you just played against, and so this is where I think we need to focus, not so much on just allowing for the cheapest way to live here. It's about the responsibility of knowing more of your community and growing that community. And you can do that and be a conservative. Let me just say that.
Yeah, I think those definitions have gotten warped over time. Next question, Governor. Last year, several candidates for the legislature, most of whom were aligned with the Freedom Caucus, declined to participate in the public educational candidate forums sponsored by the League. What do you think about candidates for public office needing to provide transparency about their positions to voters before the election? What does this refusal to debate in public say about a candidate's openness to transparency, governmental accountability, and the opportunity for their constituents to learn about their platforms?
I worry anytime we aren't prepared as politicians to stand up and explain where we stand, what we're doing, why we're doing it, what we believe in, what we don't believe in. and I think it's often an excuse that's laid out, well, it's tilted against me. You know, I can't stand a chance with that audience because it's all been stacked. The moderators got it all lined up to make me look foolish. To me, I guess, growing up here, when things get really tough, that's when you should really step up and show up. I think it is absolutely incumbent. People in Wyoming demand that, expect that of the people that are asking for their vote. And so I think it's unfortunate that people walk away from those candidate forums. You're just talking to your own crowd if you're only showing up at that. And you know, last I knew, it took more people to actually get elected than just your own crowd.
Thank you. We agree with you on that. Yeah, I think so. Is there any policy that you believe has been passed by the legislature that has not been fully understood by the voting public, such as consequences of reducing property taxes and the downstream impacts to our small towns and counties?
Yeah, I think let me say that I think that particular issue is one that Wyoming communities are beginning to wrestle with. You're hearing out of Casper, parks aren't as neat as they used to be. They don't mow them as often. You're hearing out of Basin, we're having to close libraries because we don't have the chance to keep them open. And I think these consequences are going to be larger and larger. What really is unfortunate about that is that there was a notion that property tax was going to the state. And it goes to local governments. It's how, you all know this, it's how fire departments are funded, it's how parks are funded, it's how roads are funded, senior centers, all of that stuff is funded from local taxes. For me, as a conservative, as a Republican, and somebody who grew up in Wyoming, I want to be able to vote for the taxes that are being levied on me. I don't want that to be, you know, a supermajority of the legislature. I don't want that to be imposed on high. I want to be able to have the actual people that collect it, the people that put it forward, to ask them questions, to be able to talk to them and to say, no, I don't think that's appropriate for us to be paying taxes for X or Y, but when it comes to this, I'm all for it. And that is, I think, our government. And yeah, I do worry that two things happen. One is the reduction in property tax, well, three things. The reduction in property tax obviously is harming our counties. The corollary to that is that as a Republican, I am dead set against having somebody else pay the taxes that I'm responsible for. If I'm going to use a road, I should pay a fee. Now, there's a certain history to Wyoming where we have accommodated with our severance taxes and other things for that. But in terms of replacing property tax with the mineral wealth that is generated by a corporation or people actually working and mining, so that I don't have to pay taxes, I don't really like that idea. I think we should feel responsible for that. Now, as in this government, and I think Wyoming is remarkably smart because we have been through very high highs and very low lows. 2016, for example, we had probably the biggest drop in mineral revenue since 2008, but actually 2016 was worse. Gas is pretty low today. Oil, we only have 11 rigs running in the state. Compare that to 33 that were running before COVID hit. If you've lived in Wyoming for a long time, you know that there are good times and bad. We have set it up conservatively to say we're going to set aside some dollars so that we can weather those bad times. And we want to do that in a way that isn't going to be dramatically challenging for our residents. I worry that by cutting ourselves so close to the bone, that we are setting ourselves up for, let's say, the 1980s. 1980s, you had an iron mine up at Atlantic City. Jeffrey City was going strong. In just a couple of years' time, all of that went away. You had two, you have two hospitals now too, but you had two really phenomenal hospitals. And actually Lander, Wyoming, I think of all the places in the country, had the most specialist doctors. This was a going and blowing community. And it was hit by very, very hard times and has really struggled since that time. So I think by not being honest, and I remember a member of the Joint Appropriations Committee saying the state doesn't need that property tax. State doesn't need that property tax. Member of the Joint Appropriations Committee did not understand the state doesn't collect that property tax. It's your county that does. And so by that misrepresentation and putting us at risk, I think we are not doing what is the right thing for Wyoming.
Our last topic is about Wyoming's future. A recent report regarding Wyoming's economic future included this statement: "The missing ingredient, however, is keeping young people and families in the state. By the time people born in Wyoming reach their 30s, nearly 2/3 have left, one of the highest rates in the country." In fact, this report was titled, "How Wyoming's Exodus of Young Adults Holds Back Economic Diversification." Our question, Governor, and I might revise it given that you've already said a few things about this. The question is, should we be concerned about exporting our youth and our intellectual capital? And what can we do? Now, you've already mentioned the great assets we have about safe communities and education. But I would say we've had that for a while. Is there something else happening here that we need to think about in terms of causes and what we can do to keep our youth and young families here?
Appreciate the question, Steph. I'm going to I'm not dodging it. I want to just sort of recast it a bit. In my view, if you want young families to be here, there's got to be a reason why. I don't think government does that. Government can't build the reason why kids want to be here. Government can build the reason kids don't want to be here. And I think we should be very mindful about how we encourage people to build new businesses, stay strong in the communities, build strong communities, because that's what Wyoming has always done. The state I grew up in was full of people who were big idea people, who were trying to figure out how to make something new, something different, something that would really be attractive. And there were a lot of young people that stayed here. I stayed here because I believed in the state and I believed what the future held. And we've lost a little bit of that along the way. But again, I think it comes down to, and this is why we started with education, not to revisit that, but if we have kids who are sitting in their junior and senior years feeling like they've learned it all and they're just wasting their time looking at the wall, and they're there because that's how the school gets paid, and they have to take a test that is all about whether the teacher's good or not, but they're not learning anything from it. To me, you need the accountability, there's no question, but we need to make sure that our youth, our students, are engaged, which is why we said, okay, let's go to the communities, let's listen to the communities, parents, kids, teachers, the businesses that are there. What are the things we're missing? What can we make happen? That's what RIDE schools have done. And now you've got kids that are out apprenticing. There's one young woman who wrote this. It meets all of our criteria, but she wrote a course that said, you know, I'm graduating from Cheyenne, and here are the things that I don't think I learned well enough. How do I balance my budget? How do I apply for a job? How do I make sure my credit score is good? If I want to buy a house, what do I do about that? How do I cook for myself? And she wrote this entire senior survival curriculum, is what she called it. It meets all of the criteria. And it's astounding that through all of this, it took one of our own children, one of our own students, to say, here's what I really need to go out in the world, find a job, and be able to be successful. So that's why we did the RIDE initiative, so that we could make sure our students were engaged. We did the WIP initiative because we've got, this is the one with community colleges and the university. It's designed on two sides. One is so that a senior can go on and keep gaining the education and knowledge they need to be relevant in a very rapidly changing work environment. But also, I was thinking about folks in Gillette who, if they lost, and when I started running a cat, you sat on a cat and you drove it and you ran the blade and did all that stuff. I sat in a Cloud Peak coal mining office downtown where they had 5 cats lined up in a row, and you were running all 5 of those cats simultaneously. We all know that AI is coming. We all know that the workforce of the future is going to have to be more flexible, more adaptable, more knowledgeable. And so we could recraft, like no other place in the country, we could recraft our community college and our university to be able to meet those students when they needed it, how they needed it. And so I think there are the beginnings there of being able to make that happen. And the other thing we did when it came to economic development, we said it's not coming from the state. It's going to come from your communities. We're going to try to figure out how we can help each community get the tools that they need. And understand there's a lot of failure in trying to build something, but you learn each time. So how do we get a flywheel going that's going to start spinning off stuff? And we're seeing that with digital assets. We're seeing that with manufacturing. We're seeing that with all kinds of exciting things that are happening. Now, there is a contingent, I call them Club No, that is like, no, we don't want to do any of that. We just want to kind of sit here in our little hole and pretend that Wyoming, you know, we're just going to, I tell this story because I think people who have grown up on a ranch understand it. Wyoming is gorgeous because, you know, the work here is phenomenal. You're outdoors. If you're in ranching, you raise calves, you turn the cows out in the spring, you know, you go to haying, irrigating, you gather them up in the fall, you sell them off, you do your cow work, you turn your cows back out. There's no feeding you have to do for a while. And you don't really have to need your horses around either, so you can turn them out in the hills. And you know in the spring, there are going to be some that come back fat and happy, and some that come back covered in ticks. And I am really worried that we need more of those fat horses and fewer of those that are infested with ticks. So, sorry.
Out of respect to the governor's tight schedule, we have time for one question.
Hello, thank you for your time. My name is Tessa Grissel. This is an open-ended question. I'm curious to hear about how you, maybe the legislature, are planning to facilitate or improve citizen-initiated ballot measures. My rudimentary understanding is that there's no direct route for citizens of this state to get like a constitutional amendment on the ballot. Even other processes seem somewhat convoluted. At a time when voter registration and voter turnout is low, people don't feel like their representatives are accountable to them. it seems like improving that process would improve everything for the state. So that's what I'd like to hear about. Thank you.
Well, it's a good question. It's in our Constitution that particular provision. There has been a successful. You're all going to have the chance to lower your taxes 50% more. We talked a lot about what that's doing to local government, so I think you know how I feel about it. But in any event, that process worked. If you've looked at a Colorado ballot and the 17 pages of it, or California with the 35 pages of it, for me, I would be happy to engage with you on this conversation, but I really think Wyoming set its government up because it didn't want a lot of government. It gave the legislature 60 days in 2 years to be able to do one general session, one budget session. They didn't even trust the governor to do things by themselves, so they put 4 other elected constitutional offices there because we didn't really, well, it could have been in South Pass, but we didn't really want anybody down there in Cheyenne to really wreck our lives. And I think it's important to remember, if you get good people to run, and if they have the support of their communities, and you get a preponderance of that, you can get more things done here in Wyoming than they can anywhere else in the world. I really think that our government is accessible. I think our government is responsive. And de Tocqueville basically said this. De Tocqueville said that the reason, and you probably know that, I don't want to get too long on this, but the French Revolution happened right around the same time. And what they did is lop people's heads off, and what America did is go forward and try to figure out how to build a country. And so Alexis de Tocqueville, a noble, came over and wandered around trying to figure out why this bunch of long-haired, uneducated folk had a more successful government than he did. And it was because, he said, it's the accessibility and the ability for our government to correct itself. Wyoming can correct itself. And so I would encourage, I'd love to talk to you about the initiatives, but I would encourage you to really get deep into the election process. Go for the candidates you want. Don't give up on us, please. Thanks.
And join the league.
Well, thank you.
I want to thank you, Governor Gordon, for coming out here today, joining us, and spending some time in Fremont County. We really appreciate it, and I know that you've got other things to do now, and we appreciate the time that you've taken with us. And on behalf of the league and all of the folks in Fremont County, thanks again. Appreciate it. Safe travels.
Go make your next stop a Bailey Pit Stop Travel Center. Whether you're fueling up for a road trip, grabbing a quick bite, or restocking essentials, we've got it all. Join Pit Pass Rewards and earn points on every purchase for food, drinks, and more. Visit GoWithBailey.com and make every stop a pit stop.